I was giving this one last look to check for dings before I get out the primer and brush and coat the whole inside. And I did find something here that I can take hammer and dolly to. Try a little smaller head. I'm going to compare with the other door on the inside. It really feels like there's right in here as well. That's flatter, but out in here, give it a little more. I'll do my best to keep my hideous grimaces to a minimum. I appreciated the recommendation that I wear a dust mask when I'm working so that you don't have to look at the odd things I do with my mouth. But painting shouldn't require a dust mask. Well, I hope I've gotten all of the interior surfaces primed. Also, you really can't see, maybe you can, inside the headlight area, that's all primed as well. So, I guess we'll get the sander out that Bondo certainly had an opportunity to set up. So I have my mask on for health reasons and for covering up my grimaces. So let's get started on this. So I still need to hit that spot. Just did on the other door. So my LeMans was ordered with the optional clock, and I had a 66 Catalina, and I was able to get the clock to work in that car after who knows how long it had been non-functioning. So the clock was, like I said, an option. It would not have been a standard item. That's the reason it's a separate unit from the rest of the gauges. I don't believe, though I could be wrong, that I don't believe that the GTO had a tack in this, although I honestly don't know. I never paid attention to it. So this has a uniquely curved lens on it here. Mine unfortunately has a crack in it. I'm hoping that by taking this all apart, that lens will come free, and I believe that one of the Pontiac suppliers will provide that. There's a flake of something in here. So we'll take it apart another time. But for now, we'll find a good storage place, safe place for it up on a shelf somewhere. This opening over here is where the heater and, in my case, air conditioning controls went. All of these holes back here are where different light bulbs and sockets are placed, whether it's to illuminate the back or in the actual gauge opening itself. And then some of these too would be for the idiot lights or turn signal lights. That one's kind of stripped out in there. We'll have to come back for it. I've been very fortunate with things not breaking as I disassembled this. But we have a fatality here in that this post has broken off of here. So that's something I'll have to glue. So you can see the gauge package here. So I'm going to remove this post from the screw so that I'm only dealing with the gauge package here. I want to note that appears that the longer tube is up towards the top. Unfortunately, this is in good condition. Okay, so that was holding everything together. So yesterday I was out here and I got this top portion of the gauge cluster, we'll call it the housing. Actually, it's probably not the housing because the housing's behind. Anyway, I'd removed the clock and it went into this position here and screwed. So unfortunately, even though I continued on with the disassembly, the battery had stopped on my camera. So I've reassembled loosely where things are. This was a good process to go through in order to really assure myself I knew where things went. I still have a few things that are in the pile of parts that I'm not positive where they go. I can look through diagrams on the internet and in the shop manual and the restoration guide, and especially from vendor places like Ames Performance. So we'll continue on here. I'm going to, and we'll just assume that everything had been unscrewed. So with this loose, I'm going to balance it. We've got a speedometer drive on the back and some other items, which it's easier to keep it upright if I block it up like that. We'll move this out of the way for now. Alright, so there are two cardboard tubes here fed through the lens, and one is green and one is red. I'll have to verify that. I just placed them where I thought they would be. And then, alright, so what was holding this together before was a piece of the standoff, which is now inside here. It had broken off of the fascia. So once that was loose, everything kind of came apart. Here again is the lens. I'm hoping some polishing will clean it up. Soap and water, polishing, etc. There doesn't appear to be any cracks in it. And the small little features that interface with the housing front plate are still there. So this front plate comes off, and I appreciated the blue painting. It's in pretty good shape. So other than cleaning up the rust on the outside here and spraying it with a flat or a satin dark gray or black, we should be able to reuse those. These little rubber collars on the cardboard tubes keep the bulb, the light coming from the bulb, concentrated down here to illuminate what I believe are the turn signal light and a oil pressure. Well, no, the oil pressure light is here, and the brake light is there. The brights. One of these would be illuminated when the brights are on. I believe it's the bottom one here, and it would be the red one, whereas the green one is the upper, and it is illuminated when the blinkers are going off. So once the housing plate is out of the way, these plates here, which are in very nice condition, just come right off. And I'm left with, as you can see here, the fuel gauge housing, which undoes from the back with a couple of screws, speedometer assembly, a couple of screws on the back, a couple of lenses here that went behind the oil pressure and the temperature, idiot lights, and then this light up here, which says battery. So just like on other cars there, if the generator, in this case the alternator, is not putting out the appropriate voltage, then that light illuminates. So go ahead and remove this screw. And yeah, I've had all these screws out once before. So that was the only long screw in the assembly. This plate hopefully will clean up. So something had laid on the face of that and changed the way that the black had been faded out by the sun. And then a little red lens here to fit inside of that little spacer housing. And then a red lens, because all the light bulbs are normal standard white incandescent light bulbs. It would not have been an amber or a red. So there's another red lens. So everything else will come apart from the other side. So hold that. I didn't think I would need to avail myself of hand tools in order to get these screws out, because I had just put them back in loosely by hand. So everything still turns fine on the back here, maybe a little difficult to turn, but we'll lubricate this bushing and the shaft that goes through it. Some other time we'll talk about how a speedometer actually goes. In other words, how do you turn something that's spinning very quickly and make the needle go up. So the other thing to look at here is whether or not we're getting any motion of the odometer, and unfortunately I just can't turn this fast enough by hand to be able to see if we're getting a change there in a reasonable amount of time. The unfortunate thing is that the numerals on this face, speedometer face, have really changed much differently than the surrounding two faces. So from at least one online vendor I can get an overlay to replace this, but in order to do that, it basically requires refinishing the whole face. So we will do that. Alright, and then we're left with the fuel gauge, a couple of screws. It's all in there. And the fuel gauge is out. And it too, like the speedometer, has a barely readable face on it. So we will refinish that. There's a tiny, what appears to be a tiny Phillips head screw holding the needle on for here, whereas I'm fairly certain this needle is a little press fit on there. So then what we're left with is the housing. Actually, it appears that this should pop off as well as this. Yes, so these are just held on. We've got two little sheet metal tags going into holes in the plastic housing there. Same thing here. And finally, the last little surround now off. Those I hadn't had off before. Oh yeah, so we turn this over. Out of the center housing was the brake light indicating two things. One, if you have a imminent brake failure, I believe there should be some sort of sensor kind of deal on the master cylinder. And then the other would be if your parking brake is on. This is illuminated, so there's a switch on the parking brake assembly wired back through that circuit. So we have everything is disassembled. There's a rubber little gasket now removed. So with this I can thoroughly clean it, maybe scuff it up with some steel wool, and then find a blue Rust-Oleum, Krylon, etc. spray paint can and repaint that. It would be the same blue as up here, so I could mask the darker blue off. Paint that after I paint this black. Again, clean up that lens. I don't know if I showed it, I don't think so in yesterday's, but I did spray some penetrant on this because I'll need to be able to remove that cap on the stem in order to remove the lens on the clock. I'll replace the lens. Fortunately, it's just a smaller piece as opposed to this larger one. I was fortunate enough to find a perfectly sized box to store all these pieces in. Underneath that housing, we've got gauges and the bag with all the loose hardware is in there as well. So we'll close it up, mark it, get it out of the way.